Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I'm willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Daniel Pontifrac in the house, good pal from a long time ago. But are we going to get into it, Lori? Lori Niles-Hofmann, hello, my dear. We're a little bio, and then we're going to get right into some good chats about EdTech and L&D. So, learning strategist for many, many years, 20 plus years experience in L&D across sectors that include international banking, management consulting, marketing, you name it. Lori specializes in large-scale digital learning transformation and helps organizations use data platforms and design to move learning from being a really terrible support function into being a genuine business driver. She's led and serves on several EdTech and HR tech boards, published multiple learning courses on LinkedIn and elsewhere with hundreds of thousands of completions. And she leads 8 Levers, an EdTech strategy consultancy that works with enterprise clients on learning ecosystems, AI integration, and skills strategies. Today, we're going to talk about the state of L&D, EdTech, AI, but also this phenomenal book, The 8 Levers of EdTech Transformation, a field guide to the new Future-Focused L&D. So, my friend Lori, here we are. As the recovering chief learning officer, someone whom arguably was trying and sometimes succeeding in pushing ed tech to the fore of how culture can be changed, how performance can be changed. You and I have been friends for a while because I think we agree on many things. This book is incredibly well written, and it's incredibly practical. I want to start with a why now, however, and where I'm going with this is when you talk about the new future-focused L&D, you sort of say, well, okay, rather than it being another abstract manifesto, you start kind of unpacking with some of your client work, your observations, the industry field practitioner that you are, and you're sort of bluntly, in my opinion, like walking people through kind of the mess of L&D, and then providing a really good big picture framing for the future of learning, which really is a future of culture and performance and results. So big question, but I guess to start us off, like, why now? What's going on in your head that led you to write a book that's such extraordinarily good?
Well, thank you. I mean, you're very good for the ego, I gotta say. That was quite the introduction. I'm like, wow, am I really that? And so thank you so much. I appreciate that. But why now? It's an interesting question. The book had actually been percolating in my brain probably for about 7 years, because I was already putting together notes throughout different transformations that I'd been involved in or led, and was like, these things that went well, this is what could have been improved. And I always knew I put pen, paper, fingers to keyboard, so to speak. I realized why now is because there's 2 reasons. One, the tech is starting to become available to us to do some of the things that I think we always needed to be able to do. So before, there were certain barriers that we had. The other reason is L&D is going to be under extreme pressure from commercial grade learning. If you go on ChatGPT, if you go on Gemini, they all have learning functions that are now being built in. And it's not that I want to see corporate L&D be, fighting to survive. I think we have to look to some of those things for inspiration that have more access to money and data to finally be able to do the things that we should be doing for our people. And also, there's so much change happening for employees. And we have a responsibility to keep them relevant and not redundant. And that's the core of all of this. It's not just the tech, it's the person on the other side of the screen.
Interestingly, you also talk about not just the skills of the other person on the screen, i.e., the team member, the leader, the customer, the partner, the supplier, et cetera. You talk about the new skills of the L&D professional, and I've taken the opportunity to play back some of your words because I think they struck me as OMG territory for the reader. So, for example, you write, quote, I would honestly prefer L&D not to exist as a function if they aren't delivering value. It's like watching a snake swallow a large animal. It's slow, painful, and exhausting for both. And from there, you kind of say, look, the L&D function, Lori, it risks irrelevance. And this irrelevancy is because some of them are stuck in sort of deer in headlights. Some of them are still trying to get a seat at the table, and they're not really seeing the tea leaves or reading them appropriately. And so you kind of sketch this new skills profile for L&D that includes community management, right? Data analytics, much deeper comfort level and leadership of experimentation, of AI, of VR, et cetera. So I'm just like, before we get into specifics, what's the importance of L&D and the new learning professional? Why is it that they've really got to take the bull by the horns right now?
Because if we don't, we're not a service to anybody. I don't like it when L&D has to fight for money just to do the same things that they were doing before. We have to make impact. We have to, companies who are undergoing severe transformations, we are a part of that. We are a valued part of that, and we have to do it right, because without the right skills, these things cannot happen. We're not helping our learner on the other side. We're also not helping the business. We're not helping the economy. So many different factors that we need to put in place, and that's our job. That's what we're supposed to do.
So what is it you think then that's inhibiting that? Just tell me a bit about what you've learned in your client work. I know you've got a bunch there in the book, but just like, what are the top hits there? It's like, these are the hurdles that they're not overcoming or that they have to overcome.
So I think definitely one of the big ones is this, that they're wedded to the idea of a course, that L&D, that's what we produce. We produce courses.
Mm.
And the fact is that's going to go away. We're going to produce campaigns that have triggers that build hyper-personalized and contextualized learning experiences over time. And there's a discomfort in that when you say, even to a CLO, like, you're probably not going to build as many courses as you did before, maybe 80% fewer. There's a look of horror. Like, what do I do? How do I explain my value? What am I doing? And it's like, well, wait, you're going to do a lot of things. There's going to be a lot, but it's going to be different. So I think that's the very first one. I think the second one is, and we've always had this, but distance from the business, really understanding what the business needs in real time. That's not an annual planning thing. This is a week by week, if not faster velocity cadence, to understand what the business is doing and how we're in lockstep with that strategy. And then finally, if I had to also say what holds us back, a lot of people get into learning. They're passionate about helping people, and they're passionate about why they're in the industry. And I applaud that.
Yeah.
But we now got to get real. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of things that we've got to let go of, that maybe the data is going to show that actually doesn't work. And we're going to be put under a microscope. And I think there's a lot of uncomfortableness around doing that. But again, it's not about us. We have to be servant leaders in this entire transformation.
There seems to be, however, right, a crutch, and the crutch goes by an acronym called the LMS. And so early on in the book, you sort of sketch out, how we need to shift from LMS thinking to invisible LMS, like this learning ecosystem. So you do trace kind of the origin and the history, where it's compliance-oriented LMSs to sort of richer, LXs, or learning experience platforms. And you're kind of painting a picture where you believe that the formal platform is going to disappear into the flow ultimately of work and kind of be this invisible middleware. And you write, quote, it's not another destination platform or vanity project. We don't need another standalone LMS or content library that sits separate from employees' day-to-day work. What we need is a learning ecosystem that's deeply integrated into the now of work, that's invisible yet omnipresent, love the word, that's personalized yet aligned with organizational goals. So I went back into my little Dan Wright's history folder. And 15 years ago, I wrote a column called The Standalone LMS is Dead. Is it dead, Lori? And are we finally going to be in this place?
Well, I probably shouldn't say this on a podcast, but let's you and I go out with some weaponry and just take it out, take it out, take it out. I think more and more, yes, it's going to be dead. And I also too, I love the fact that, of course, you were thinking about this 15 years ago because you're so brilliant. Um, if I look at it now, where is the LMS quote unquote going to be? It's going to be in that prompt bar in Copilot or in Gemini. You won't even know that you are interacting with a learning coach within that. It's going to be that seamless. And there's going to be a whole ecosystem managed behind that. But that's all the other person is going to see. They won't know that they're logging into an LMS. The LMS will become middleware. It's going to be something that I get for regulatory purposes, even though I have a whole bunch of feelings about that large companies will need to keep that fine. It tracks, it manages, does what it says on the tin. But it's not going to be the destination. It's going to be, as I said, enveloped into Copilot. And if you look, there are even some content libraries, for example, right now, and I am not endorsing, but Get Abstract, for example, they now have their content within the ecosystem for Copilot. So that just comes up automatically. You don't even know that you're going to a module or a SCORM package. You see now with OpenAI has a relationship with Coursera. Again, you don't even know where it's coming from. It will you'll get like an explanation, but meaning you're not going to a library and searching out a course. It doesn't exist.
Okay, so if we talk about learning ecosystems, then, and you've got L&D people and their definition of learning ecosystem, and then you and I continue to work with and deal with HR, IT, and finance. So three more of the big back four, right? And so
Right.
tell me a bit about how and what L&D needs to be doing to, I guess, prepare for the learning ecosystem, this invisible middleware, when we are still needing to work with our colleagues in HR, in IT, in finance.
Yep. Absolutely. I think the very first thing and the advice that I give to any CLO that I'm talking to right now is get your data cleaned up. Okay. Because it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. So you've got to go in and make sure that your data is clean. I won't go into all the million ways that you need to do that, but a lot of times the data that we have is not going to be useful, meaning that it can't be triangulated with all the places that you talk about. So you have to make sure your data is in order. That's your very first step. The second thing that you need to understand is what is your role in the organization? And I say this with no disrespect. You're called learning and development. You develop learning and development, and you develop people. This is what you do. So you need to understand that you are part of what I like to call a supply chain management of skills. And different parts of that supply chain are what sits in IT, what sits in HR, and what sits in finance. So I think the analogy I use in the book is, you're a pizza factory. You need tomatoes. Do you grow them? That's learning. Do you buy them? Well, that's going to be HR. It's going to be talent procurement. Do you have them in tins? That might be IT. How much do you pay for them? Well, that's finance. And you're making decisions based on that because you don't want too many tomatoes that are going to rot in your factory, and you don't want too few because that's not going to be very good pizza and product. So you have to think across that ecosystem. And understand your exact purpose within it. And I think sometimes L&D will swerve into other lanes or not understand that the decisions they're making actually are impacting a wider ecosystem behind them.
And so we have colleagues, though, in HR, IT, finance. So I want to let's dig into each of these separately, right? So from an HR perspective, what do we have to do with our HR colleagues for them to see the invisible middleware and the shift from LMS compliance only? Because in fairness, a fair number of HR professionals still see L&D as okay, they're the guys that run the courses.
Right. So first thing that we need to do is position ourselves as the strategic advantage. The thing that I love doing to have a first conversation with HR is or with talent, within HR is usually the first place that I start. I look at the job postings and I look for the ones that have been up for like 8 to 9 weeks, and I look at the specific skills or competencies depending on how the organization is developed. And I'm looking for those and I'm saying, they're not able to find those. And I go in with that information, and I don't bring the names, but I usually will bring a list number wise of people in the organization, their departments, and where they have adjacent skills to the ones that are missing. And I sit down with them and say, hey, what can we help you with this? We can actually look at some of these people who have adjacent skills that you're looking for on the market. Can we start being more strategic about this? And that initial conversation is usually when they start to see what value we're able to bring. I don't start with learning. I don't start with these are all the courses we built, and I don't start with hours of courses. I start with a problem that they themselves are having. And that's usually, it's talent attraction, it's internal mobility. And I try and work with them on those specific things. I usually also too, that usually stems, sort of cascades out to, we do a skills campaign on 2 or 3 really key skills that we're struggling to find maybe out in the wild, right? To bring into our organization. So let's run some experiments where we build that capability internally. And then it's like, okay, now we have a symbiotic relationship that is happening. But yeah, I don't talk about number of courses and libraries and any of that. That's off the table. I try and solve their pain points first.
And then so let's say we've got them, kind of like they're treated like business owners, and they are, right? And their ownership is of talent or hires or whatever, right? So cool, I get it. That's awesome. We also have to walk down the hallway and sort of imagine that you've done this several times, and that is, hey, CIO or CTO or director of IT or people that are doing a bunch of tech implementations. In these days, a lot of the AI sort of is, quote, owned by the IT group. So if we are recommending sort of an invisible middleware LMS and how learning and development is self-embedded into the flow of work, tell me how and what L&D should be doing with IT in the CIO's office.
Okay, well, the first thing you do is you have a conversation with them, right? I said, you need to make contact. You don't make contact when you've gone out to a conference and you've walked the expo floor and you found, the piece of technology you fell in love with. Okay, you cannot do that. You have to ask your parents' permission to date. Okay,
Yeah,
so don't
nice.
do that. You've got to talk to IT. The questions that you want to ask to IT, from IT are, you want to understand their AI strategy. You want to understand, so are you G Suite or are you Microsoft? Most corporates, enterprise are going to be Microsoft,
Yeah.
right? And if they are Microsoft, then you want to talk to them about what have they turned on, what have they turned off? Because there are different modules that can be configured. Sometimes things will be turned off for regulatory purposes, or sometimes risk has gotten involved. Some things they may not have thought of, but you want to understand that framework before you do anything at all, right? So you want to understand too that they'll have typically documents about what type of standards they expect from a vendor, everything from where the servers should sit, and their service level agreements and all that. Have that conversation first. The other thing though is to understand how they actually want AI to be used, because this really does hinge on AI. And how are you going to fit into that rather than you launching your own thing? That's going to be a death sentence if you go off and launch something that's your own thing. Do not do that. But so you need to go where they are going, and you need to follow them, and you need to integrate there, because the fact is they're going to be controlling, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they are going to be monitoring and doing how work gets done at the company. And you need to insert yourself into that, not be something extraneous or be something duplicitous. IT also too is going to help you, coordinate things with knowledge management, for example, and other databases. So you need to understand, where they have APIs plugged in, where can you plug into, all of those things. I mean, I could go on and on about MCPs and agents. I won't do that, but you have to understand that space. So do it now. Do it now. Have a conversation.
We need to do a second podcast about all the MCP agentic AI pieces that, but
Exactly.
really in the weeds of that. Okay,
For
and
sure.
so I'm walking down further down the hallway now, and I'm in the CFO's office, and they're very used to a line item that is 1.5% of investment, right? On overall, sometimes it's profit, sometimes revenue, sometimes cap, like total expenditure, whatever it is. There's some percentage they're used to. It's like, okay, L&D, go and do your thing. So should CLOs and just learning and L&D professionals in general be rethinking sort of their investment model within the budgetary new world, right, of what L&D should be portraying?
Yes, they definitely need to rethink that conversation. The very, very first one is finance. We're not going to give you an annual plan that tells you how many courses we're going to deliver
Right.
because we just can't. Okay. That's not how we're going to operate anymore. So that metric needs to be retired. Yes, we will need some static budget for things that are regulatory. So yes, we will do anti-money laundering, code of conduct, things that we need to report back to regulators on. And we
Yeah.
know, generally speaking, we know what that cost is, right? Give or take. And what I say to them is that yeah, we need that, but we're going to be more agile throughout the rest of the year. I know my cap of what I can spend, but we're going to look at this actually on a month by month basis and be wise about our investments. And those investments are not going to be in courses. They may be investments in face-to-face. We may still have that because I don't think face-to-face goes away. I don't want to see that. I think there is still a massive need for that. But starting to explain to them that it is going to be even different models for how we are built. If we have a course library and it's going through Copilot, how do we pay for licensing that way?
Mhm.
Like all this is exploding. So we've got to ask them for some grace and keep them aligned as to what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And also too that we are probably going to be looking, and that's HR and finance. I hate to say it, we're going to look at restructuring our teams and restructuring how workflow happens. So those are going to be the big asks from finance.
I don't think it's something that we should be frightened about. I think that the whole organizational design of back end and front end is going to have to be rethought. And so, what to me was the L&D function actually is another way in which to look at and say, well, how does it become an enablement function, and how does enablement then get wedded into or embedded or kind of spies in the camp type of thinking, like for them to do good work, but in different type of work. And I think that's where this evolution comes to be, which segues nicely to another line of thought, which comes towards the end of the book. And I'll read the line and then I'll sort of get into it. So you say, and it's about learning and work and the learning work continuum that you write about. So, quote, in the learning work continuum, every task becomes a learning opportunity, and every learning moment directly contributes to work output. It's a virtuous cycle that drives both individual growth and organizational performance. And it struck me as a little bit sort of like our mutual pal, Harold Jarkey's learning is the work, work is the learning. And I'm thinking, yes, finally someone's put it into words here in a book that says, hey, y'all, learning is the work, work is the learning. This learning work continuum is so important. That's why you kind of have teased in the invisibility of an LMS or invisible ecosystem. Learning is embedded into the workflow and the work processes. So I wanted you to expand on sort of this notion of the learning work continuum.
So I think you summed it up very nicely. I think what I would look at though is how it actually happens. A
Okay.
lot of people say, well, AI by magic. It's like, well, no. So what I'm looking at is, and the concept I call is triggers. And by triggers, it's actually how that learning in work and work and learning get actually triggered to happen. That's not by magic. That's by design. So an example I use in the book is that somebody has done level 4 Spanish. The next time they log into Excel, we have a trigger that says, hey, do you want to change your language settings in Excel? Or it could be Excel or Outlook or whatever. And then we're looking at how well they're using the tool in Spanish. And then they say, okay, you've reached a certain point. Another trigger will happen and we'll connect you, say, with a project that's happening in Colombia. And you can speak to somebody in Spanish, and you're going to get invited to their Slack channel or their teams and work together. And so all of those things start putting them together, but they're highly orchestrated. It's not happenstance. And also, I think fundamentally, we wouldn't have started the whole Spanish thing had we not known that we needed Spanish. And we looked at the skills of our organization and said, hey, this is one where we're finding it's hard to hire for this. And yet we have, we don't have enough people in our organization that speak Spanish, but we have some that speak French. So we're going to, target them and say, hey, you're already bilingual. Maybe we can do this. But getting back to that work, learn as work, it also comes down to a conversation of that leadership needs to understand that you need time for people to learn. You have to understand that there are going to be mistakes, and you have to bake that in to your models if you're going to actually get learning happening when people are working. For example, with AI, people said, well, drop AI, add AI to every project, but yet you still have to meet these outputs. Well, hold on. You've just given them a whole new tool, and you're saying they're used to driving a car, and you said, well, here's a Winnebago, and we want you to go at the same speed, and we want you to do all the things you did before, and you're like, I don't even know if I can park this thing, right? Like it's massive. So that also too is a key part. Not sure if I answered the question effectively, but that's what I'm thinking when I look at that work and learning paired together.
So let's bring in lever 4, because I think this is another good segue. Mm-hmm. So lever 4, I think the skills revolution and sort of slightly unhelpful AI, as you cheekily call it at times. So tell me a bit your L&D, even P&C, and this skills revolution sort of piece where we've got these skills intelligence platforms these days, right? We've got these inference tools. We've got talent marketplaces. Like there seems to be rife with a bunch of other shiny objects over here. What is L&D supposed to make of the shiny objects, the skills revolution, and how do they become, I guess, almost like an L&D skills agent to be forward thinking with what the org needs so that they then can, Lori, obviously create the right pathways, inferences to the right learning on the job, the learning work continuum.
Sure, exactly. So, and it's interesting you bring up skills. My book is probably already out of date. I thought we'd get to 2027, but people are already talking about tasks, measuring tasks instead of skills. So they don't care what skill you have, it's whether you can actually do something. That's a whole other thing. And I think I even say in the book, like task taxonomy, like say that 10 times
I saw
fast.
that, yeah.
It doesn't flow off the tongue, right? So I'm thinking of the skills taxonomy. To me, that is the spine of the organization. It's how all these systems are going to connect into. And again, I'm thinking like that supply chain analogy, right? So you're going to have HR plugging into it. You're going to have finance. You're going to have IT, those talent marketplaces. All that infrastructure is going to be labeled by those tasks. So pretend that those tasks are the product SKU. Mm-hmm. And for L&D, their job is to understand, when we have a deficiency, because and we know that we need this, or when we have too many of a certain skill that we want to start to sunset. And there's a number of ways to do that. And L&D needs to stay on top of this. For one thing, some organizations will rely on a tool, say like a Lightcast, which is workforce intelligence. It's looking at all the skills that are listed in job postings, and it starts to rank which one by industry is starting to fall, and which new terms are coming up. And you want to look at your skills taxonomy and say, hey, do I have anyone in my library who's got that skill or adjacent to it? So that's the important thing. The other, or what we might also be doing in our organization, I like to be plugged into the PMO. I want to understand what projects are coming, what projects have been funded, which ones have been sunsetted, and to be able to say, okay, what skills do I actually need in those? AI is great for this. There's a lot of times where I'll just plug in a project with some, healthy prompts around it and say, what would be the skill set that I would need on this team? And you pull that out and then say, okay, I'm looking at my skills taxonomy, and what do I have against that? Am I aligned? So L&D really should be in that space, helping them keep that healthy inventory. We don't want to fill every skill, because a skills taxonomy will be everything from automation to zoology. If I'm a bank, I don't need a zoologist. It'd be nice to know if I had one in case a panda escapes, but I don't need it. But my job is to keep that sort of homeostasis happening, so that the organization has the skills and tools that they need to do what they have committed to.
Another mutual pal of ours is Dr. Keith Keating. He's the Chief Learning and Development Officer at BDO Canada, and he speaks of both HR, but mostly L&D, removing themselves from thinking and operating as order takers. So how does the L&D professional with sort of within your eight levers, I suppose, right? What's the fundamental things they need to be doing to be that proactive non-order taker, to get into being enablement, to get into helping the business with the learning work continuum with AI or not? I'm just telling like hoping that you can provide some insights on what they got to do next.
Sure. So I actually do see this as going to be very agentic driven, but
Hmm.
you can do it manually. The first thing that I like to do with organizations is have agents that are collecting data from key critical places within the organization, so that I can start to get a heat map of things that are happening. And I'm looking at that data on a daily basis. I'm looking at search terms. I'm looking at hashtags. I'm looking at the health of projects. I'm looking at sales targets. I'm looking
Yeah.
at all of those pieces to then be able to say, okay, where are deficits? My job then is to analyze those deficits and determine, is it a learning problem? So this is your basic performance consulting, because some things are not. I mean, it's sales. If they're selling snow blowers and it's been 30 degrees for the past 6 months, well, nobody's going to buy a snow blower no matter what we do. So that's fair. But I'm going to be looking at those data points to proactively go to the business. The other thing I'm going to do is, and I've actually automated this as well, is the learning triage. And I'm hoping I'll be able to build this out into a tool. I'm working with somebody phenomenal on that, which basically walks you through the learning triage, where you operate like an emergency room, that you have limited resources. You don't get seen in order. It's according to severity.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, okay, what things are most important to the business, and I want to make sure that I know those, and as they change, I know when they've changed, because I'm going to prioritize the things that help the business make money, save money, or mitigate risk. And then there are pieces that are going to go to what I call the morgue, that they're not contributing to anything. It's a vanity project. I'm terribly sorry if that offends anybody, but we do get those. So it's a very different way of thinking, but it's the triage as well as the proactive data coming in are the big two things that I do to be able to switch us from order takers.
Well, that notion of becoming twofold, right? Sort of the new CLO is a chief listening officer. You got to be out
Yeah,
there in the field,
correct.
listening to the trends, kind of like CIA or MI5 agents, right? Like you're getting all this data, you're getting all these insights, and you have to make sense of it to then recommend, well, how do you take out Osama? How do you go in to take out a potential terrorist? I mean, it's the business isn't terrorist. That's not what I'm saying, but it's like you have to be a listener, but then you have to be able to
Exactly.
triage as well, to your point.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. But the trick is that you're doing it with data, and that helps you. We talked before about that finance conversation. That then becomes really helpful, because I can go to finance and say, this is why we're doing it. This is what's happening. And you paint a better picture of the business. A lot of times we rely on intuition, and we had the annual plan, and it doesn't serve us in this new environment. In some ways, I mean, it was a terrible event, but I kind of loved how COVID upset L&D departments, because
Yeah.
yeah, get rid of your L&D, your annual plan. It's gone now. You need to, fly without it. And I think that was a terrible way to run that experiment, but we can learn from it. I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting that was the
Yeah.
reason for the epidemic, but we learned that we don't have to have that annual plan anchoring us. It doesn't serve us or the company.
All right. Last question. Kept you long enough. What gives you hope in this space then on the L&D learning work continuum? What's saying, you know what, we've got this and here's why.
What I love right now is and what I always wanted is I have the ability to do what I call closed loop reporting. I can look at stuff in real time and say, is that making an impact or is it not? And quickly pivot or
Mm.
machine learn how people learn. That fascinates me, that we can now look at, say, 1,000 people who've gone through, particular pieces of content. How did they do it? How did they perform? Where did they stumble? Can we re-engineer and optimize learning in a way where they maybe won't stumble? What was unclear? That to me right now is opens up so much potential, that I'm just super excited, because I think getting that hyper contextualized, personalized learning experience, that's what we've all been striving towards. We actually are like a millimeter close to getting there. And I think that that's phenomenal.
I love it. Hope for the win. Okay, Lori Niles-Hofmann, where can we find out more about you?
Sure, you can find me at 8levers.com. That's eight with the number, levers.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. One F, two N's. Blame my
And
husband.
and you are an amazing contributor, both in life. This book's amazing. The Eight Levers of EdTech Transformation, a field guide to a new future-focused L&D. But yes, I learned loads from you on LinkedIn. So anyone that's listening or watching, please do give a follow to Lori, and please pick up the book, because if the aging Ruby ex CLO can learn a hell of a lot from Lori, and sort of how there are new ways in which to think about the L&D space and the learning and work continuum itself, then you can as well. So Lori, thank you for taking the time joining me today.
A million thanks to you. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Amazing. Okay, folks, that's Lori Niles-Hofmann, the book again, The Eight Levers of EdTech Transformation. Pick it up wherever you get your books. And thanks for listening or watching to another episode of Leadership Now.